with Edley.
I swear we're not going to, but is that on par with I'm sorry, but, which really isn't I'm sorry, by the way? Or is it on par with something like, you look really good, but, which means it's not really a compliment? Yeah. You're just putting the but in there to basically justify the insult?
Yeah.
Or the thing that came before that. Like, are we at the point where that's the case? You know what I'm talking about? Like, you're not going to go up to your better half, your fiance, TJ.
Yeah.
You know, I love you, honey, but that dress doesn't look good on you.
Right.
Like, first of all, probably not advised.
Right.
But you include that clause. The reason for asking that is, are you over but the whole Shedeur Sanders situation? From a raw, like, NFL front office, bash the league standpoint, I'm kind of over it, much like I've been over the whole embrace debate thing behind it the entire way. But there's some sociological and I don't even call them psychological. I'm a personal accountability guy. Like, newsflash, in case you haven't listened to the Fast Lane enough. I'm a personal accountability person. In this country, as somebody who by and large is pretty libertarian, you're free to make decisions. Like, I am not a, like, tell people what to do situation. You must follow this religion. You must engage in this behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell people what my beliefs are and how they align with how I think the consequences might unfold for a particular decision. But again, getting religious for 10 seconds in the fast lane, part of my religious belief as a Christian is not so much this is how the government should influence it, because I don't really view a lot of elected officials in a high capacity, and certainly they're probably not going to practice what they would preach or you would want them to preach. But I look at it from the angle of, I would rather people just be free and be wanting to make the right decision because it's in their own heart. And as a Christian, I don't have the power to judge it. I don't tell people you're going to heaven or hell because that's not for me to do. But God can read your heart. That's kind of my religious theory on things. Again, I don't get judgmental of, you engage in this behavior, you do that. Like, if it's really bad, and we will get to this momentarily in the Fast Five at 5-ish, I'll be critical. But in a lot of cases, what you might choose to do if it's not harming someone else, that's ultimately the consequences of that are between you and God, in my opinion. So I'll be loving, I'll be kind. Sometimes I may be critical if it's hurting other people, but look, I don't smoke weed. If you want to smoke weed on your free time, great. But by not doing that, I don't have to worry about answering to God whether that was a good decision or a bad decision when I get to the pearly gates. Again, maybe it's not as bad of a decision, and maybe you're okay. I'm not going down that road. But the reason for bringing that up is I heard this interesting comment, and Shedeur Sanders, the whole fall in the NFL draft, from top 5 to round 5. They're fascinating angles to this as much as anything, just because there's a personal accountability angle to this. His family chose not to have NFL representation by an agent who could have guided them through this process. You chose to. You were arrogant enough to think you could do this on your own. Live with the consequences. 5th round, got nobody to blame but yourself. Also, you chose not to engage in really any of the pre-draft activities. And again, let's use a comparison. Travis Hunter could get away with that. If Travis Hunter was a diva and only wanted to interview with certain teams because they were picking in the top 5 or the top 10 or might trade up into the top 5, could have done that. There were all sorts of avenues for that. He had the leverage as a talent, greater tolerance. And the Shedeur Sanders family, I think Deion the dad got in the way of Deion the advisor and coach. Deion the dad is, I'm a parent. My child is the best. I'm a cheerleader, rather than I'm a coach. I need to be a leader, which sometimes means telling my kid things that they may not want to hear, but I'm not talking as dad's son. I'm talking as coach the player and advising them to get representation, because I'm taking off my dad hat and putting on my coach hat. I don't think Coach Prime has enough experience coaching, since by and large he's coached his son the entire way, of coaching in a world where that's not the case. We're going to get a real taste of that this coming year of how he handles that dynamic. But the thing is, in the player empowerment era, and I am all for players making money, you have the power to go out and make money. You have the power to leave for the best deal. But you also have the power to deal with the consequences that if you're not mature enough to handle what might come your way. And you have the power to make bad decisions and live with the consequences. Like, this is the whole, again, getting off my lawn for a second here in the fast lane, but the whole snowplow, snowflake syndrome situation that's popped up. So many parents believe it's their idea to be their kid's biggest cheerleader, which to an extent I'm on board with, but that their idea and their role is to be the cheerleader for the child. I'm a dad. I got 2 6-year-old boys. I'm a cheerleader for monumental moments. But sometimes being a cheerleader gets superseded by being a leader, which means I'm not the cheerleader because I'm not telling you what you want to hear and just clapping. I'm telling you what you need to hear to be a man. And that's my role as a dad. Now, again, getting my usher on for a second in the fast lane, if I were to look at this totally differently, then it may be different if I had a girl. Because, father-son, father-daughter, dynamics are totally different. But a lot can be judged based on what's said and what's not. Daniel Jeremiah, NFL draft analyst for the NFL Network, was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday. You can hear Rich Eisen show every weekday, noon to 3, right here on the VTR and Sports app. But I think the NFL spoke. And I don't think this is just collusion. I think they spoke because if Shedeur Sanders was a can't-miss talent, if he was a Jaden Daniels caliber talent, let's use that as an example, he could have blown off the pre-draft process. But inferior talent, inferior tolerance. Less talent, less tolerance for the antics around Shedeur Sanders, blowing off the pre-draft process. And Daniel Jeremiah kind of mentioned that yesterday on the Rich Eisen show.
This is, partly my opinion, and then combined with talking to some other people.
Sure.
And this was the takeaway that I had, Rich. There's a reason why you have agents, and there's a reason why people go to these facilities and prepare for the combine. They're not just going there to prepare to put their hand down and properly run a 3-cone drill. They're preparing them for how to present themselves in front of teams and how to, handle these situations.
Preparation. You can't just wing it. Like there are people out there that get by throughout school at different levels because they can sweet talk the teacher and they can wing it. Generally speaking, for those people, there comes a point, whether it's later on in your academic life or in the real world, where all of a sudden the fake it till you make it part has to be a backup plan, not your game plan. And to have it as your game plan goes to what Jeremiah elaborated on, Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, when he spoke on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, which you can hear every weekday, noon to 3, right here on VTR and Sports.
It just sounds to me and talking to people that process wasn't handled well on Shedeur's part.
You think? Very much so. And here's part of this. Again, this is Coach Prime. And the fascination for me is coach, player, leader, cheerleader, parent, coach. The roles are different. Part of your role as an advisor, as a coach, is to be willing to be critical and to point out areas where somebody can strengthen themselves. I don't know if Coach Prime's ever really done that with Shedeur Sanders. Has ever done that with Shiloh Sanders. Hey, you can't talk as much smack as I did because, to be truthful, you're not as athletically gifted as I was. Deion was the best cornerback in his day and age. His children were not the best safety. Shiloh Sanders asked the Oregon Ducks, by the way. Shiloh talks a bunch of smack and then gets totally embarrassed in Eugene in that 35-0 game. The infamous, they're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins. All-time soundbite, by the way, which we should have ready, but I'm not professional enough to do that. But it goes to the point of overvaluing your stock and, again, thinking as a parent, not as a coach.
That to me would have been an easy fix if you had hired an agent who would maybe just guide him through that process a little bit better. So, there was, and I haven't confirmed this, but there was people saying that, he was locked in on those teams picking in the top 7 and wasn't giving as much time or attention to some of those other teams through the process. So they didn't have as full of a workup on him as they would have liked to feel comfortable with him.
And if you're only locking in on certain teams, you're casting some out of the way. Again, overvaluing your stock and thinking you're worth more than you really are. As a parent, your job is to be a cheerleader for your child. But it goes to the old adage, like, again, thinking as a parent, and if I'm off base, please let me know. Fastlane Edlane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and fastlaneedlane@gmail.com if you want to write that way instead. But the concept of being a parent versus being a friend, like, they're not the same thing. My job right now with 2 6.5-year-old boys, and it's been since they were born July 7th, 2018. And since we knew about it, we adopted them May 31st, 2018. From that day till when they grow up to be grown men on their own, showing they can be productive, quality members of society. My job is not to be their friend first. I will be their friend. I will be friendly. I will do things to cultivate the relationship. Tell me if I'm old school or not. Like, tell me if I'm too old school. By the way, I'm open to you criticizing me on this. I don't necessarily think I'm going to back down, but I'm open to it. But too often, new age parenting is this: I need to be my child's friend first. No! That's not part of your job. It's your job at first needs to be at the moment you know you're having the child, you're raising that child to be an adult. And then when that child proves they can be a functioning adult, dynamics change. My parents took a little bit later than they probably should have to let go of that. But again, in hindsight, I at least respect. And by the way, mom and dad, if you're listening, thank you, first of all. But second of all, I hope you take joy and satisfaction knowing that you've lived long enough to hear me say this. Some of their clinging on a little bit late as I became a functioning grown-up member of society was a little bit much. You've heard about the family dynamics, sister with a substance abuse problem, how that was handled. Okay. But for the most part, again, you realize your parents aren't perfect, but 99% of what they do is, is the best of their abilities, and they're rooted in love. And that's where you have grace and forgiveness. I bring that up to say Deion could be harder on his child. There's the parental dynamic of this, and that's part of what makes it so fascinating, because it's not just what was said about Shedeur Sanders. Frankly, it's a lot of what was not said. Now time for a little what he said and what he meant to explain.
The best place to find true insight is in a press conference.
Great kids, great school. Football's important to that team.
It's not a media scrum.
I'm attacking it with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, to faith, family, football. Tough as a $2 steak is what comes to mind. Let's have at it. We're going to do it or die trying. Better today than yesterday. Better tomorrow than today.
It's listening to the Fast Lane dissect what's really being said by your favorite players, coaches, and administrators. It's time for what he or she said and what he or she meant.
And of course, we go to somebody who is noted for establishing high standards because
the standard is the standard.
And that's William and Mary grad Mike Tomlin, Pittsburgh Steelers head football coach, favorite of ours here in the Fast Lane. By the way, I'm not a fan of how they've handled the Aaron Rodgers situation, letting him kind of dangle them out in the wind. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. But here's what Mike Tomlin said about the pre-draft visit that Shedeur Sanders had with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I've obviously known his father for a long time. My first time meeting him, and to be quite honest with you, we didn't talk a whole lot about my relationship with his father. It was a normal pre-draft visit to spend time with a young man, to talk ball, to get to know him as an individual, to get to see how he processes and sees the game and how he articulates his football experience. From that standpoint, it was a very normal visit and a very productive one.
From that standpoint, it was a very normal visit. Nothing more was said, though. It wasn't mentioned about whether there were cameras around or not. Wasn't mentioned about the idea of delving into Shedeur Sanders and poking and prodding his past. Like, Mike Tomlin is very calculated, and he's obviously got a good relationship with Deion Sanders, and there's a level of mutual respect. But people thought Pittsburgh was going to be the fall spot for Shedeur in the first round of the draft. Newsflash, it wasn't. They and many other teams, every team in the NFL, bypassed Shedeur Sanders multiple times. Like, they spoke based upon what they saw partially on tape, but also partially upon everything else. And here's the interesting one. When Mike Tomlin spoke, he spoke about Shedeur Sanders and was asked about the intangibles, and it was beyond just the intangibles that people wanted to know about. But Mike Tomlin just stuck with the intangibles that he saw on tape.
I think the things that stood out were evident in this video. There's a toughness there that doesn't get talked about enough. There's a competitive spirit there that doesn't get talked about enough. I know he's very talented and made a lot of plays for his university and his team, but the intangible qualities displayed on tape were impressive to me.
The intangible qualities displayed on tape were impressive. You know what that basically is? He's talking about the competitive spirit and his toughness. He's basically praising without telling you everything that Mike Tomlin thinks about Shedeur Sanders. He doesn't have to. The Pittsburgh Steelers' decision to not draft Shedeur Sanders and having multiple selections in the NFL draft tell you that. But he's basically saying what the majority of the league said, which is, except the difference is Tomlin's on record and he's praising all the intangible qualities that you saw on tape, which is another way of saying the intangible qualities away from the game probably raise some red flags, because pretty much everybody has brought that particular point up. Pre-draft process, only wanting to interview with certain teams, not coming across as prepared, Coach Prime trying to dictate where he lands, all of that. And it goes back to the dynamic we mentioned, which is what's your job as a coach and what's your job as a parent. They may be different, but in a lot of cases, there are similar overlaps. It's to prepare your child for the best chance. And that doesn't just mean being a loud cheerleader and a snowflake, snowplow parent. Snowflake, my child is precious. I'll never criticize them. Snowflake, let's remove all obstacles. Sometimes it's showing your child they exist and guiding them through that. And again, don't at me with this one of you're not a parent. I'm a parent of 6.5-year-old boys. They're not old enough yet to be in this spot, but these are the type of things you think about and consider because I believe decisions you make now as a parent are laying the groundwork for going forward and establishing, as Mike Tomlin would want us to know, the standard.
The standard is the standard.
And that's what you establish from the very beginning. Feedback, by the way, has come in on this, and we want to get to it, and I don't think we'll be discussing it a ton more, although if you weigh in, we will. Les chimes in. Whoever took Shedeur, was going to be getting a future star. I watched every Colorado game live or taped because I'm that big of a fan, and Shedeur has it as a player. He's calm, cool, accurate, and has high football IQ, and he's tough as nails. Now, let me pause on Les's comments right there. Mike Tomlin basically reiterated that. All of that comes across on film for Shedeur Sanders. Like, I think in the heat of battle, he's there. It's the throwing your alignment under the bus after a loss, which, in the North Nebraska game, most notably came about. It's all the antics surrounding it. That's the part that teams have issues with. But to go on what Les said, and we appreciate the feedback as always, please keep it coming. Fast Lane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Hey, I've been a football fan since the mid-'70s. I've been right plenty of times. One example is Jalen Hurts. I've been wrong other times. I thought Johnny Manziel was going to be good. Just a couple of instances. If we see situations where, Shedeur is in the right situation, he could thrive. But tomorrow, the draft is going to be very interesting. And one more thing to consider, Michael Penix Jr. is going to be a problem for Atlanta this year, even though you mock the trade up to Atlanta. Just watch and see. So, by the way, total side note, because we want to get too off kilter and having to take a detour in the fast lane. On the Atlanta Falcons, I never doubted Michael Penix Jr., the player. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's a really good leader. I think, frankly, again, if we're talking African-American quarterback to African-American quarterback, that's the type of situation that Shedeur Sanders could learn from or could have learned from, because Penix was drafted in an inauspicious situation after Atlanta gave that big contract to Kirk Cousins. And, it wasn't exactly the most desired situation in which he entered, and he's been nothing but professional. So there are things you can learn. I don't know about their relationship, Penix and Sanders, if there is one even at all. But I look at this from that angle and go, okay, wow, there's something that's, again, worth considering. But the stuff on tape is great. I don't think Shedeur is a bad kid. This is not Johnny Manziel, win or lose, we booze. Just look at the documentary, by the way, because he was famous for that phrase. But there are other thoughts that have come in on this. Tsunami Tommy chimed in. The prank phone call to Shedeur Sanders when no one on earth had the number except the NFL teams is what sealed the theory for me that it was an inside job in the NFL. I'm not sure an agent could have helped, to be honest. Teams were given orders from someone to stay away. I'll go to my deathbed believing that. However, an agent could definitely help now, especially if Shedeur gets no playing time or worse, isn't that good. Heck, if nothing else, it could facilitate a trade out of Cleveland. Keep in mind, I have a Deion bias, Tsunami Tommy adds. I grew up loving him and still do, rooting for him the past couple of years because so many were rooting against him, much like his playing days in both sports. So again, I'll put to Tommy's point, I thank him for the feedback, but the reality about this is I don't think NFL teams were given orders. I think they just saw that with great talent comes great tolerance. But with mediocre talent comes much less tolerance. And with great talent, they would put up with a lot of the distractions. Cam Newton, a lot of distractions, but great talent. Backed it up as a player. We've seen that before. Caleb Williams, you could argue. Sorry to our guy Trey from the morning warm-up who loves Caleb Williams for the morning warm-up 7 to 8 a.m. right here on VTR in Sports. But Caleb Williams kind of got some maturity questions, but he's a phenomenal talent. So people will put up with it. Shedeur Sanders, go back to the Daniel Jeremiah profile, said that he compared him to Kenny Pickett. You put up with that for Kenny Pickett? Probably not the same way you're putting up with it for Cam Newton in his prime or Caleb Williams coming out of the draft. And that's a big part of the reason why this changes. And I will brush back. I think an agent could help now, surely, but an agent could have helped going forward. And if Daniel Jeremiah is backing up what we said, then Daniel Jeremiah carries even more weight. Certainly he should than we do here in the Fast Lane. When we come back, we'll have the Fast Five at 5-ish after Ben Cates of newsadvance.com. Keep the feedback coming. Fast Lane, Ed Lane, wherever you listen to podcasts, and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Fast Lane back after this, right here on the VTRN Sports app.
Mark Dalton here with the Terry Auto Group. If you don't love your car, then you're simply just driving the wrong one. At Terry Volkswagen, Terry Subaru, Terry Auto Outlet, and the Terry Clearance Center, we've got the perfect new or used car for you. We make your car buying experience easy. Need help with imperfect credit? No problem. Our team works hard to get you approved and back on the road. Because when you shop at Terry, you drive away happy. Visit us at any of our 4 locations or online at terryautogroup.com. Terry Auto Group. You'll love our cars.
Car insurance rates are rising rapidly. That's no secret. It's because the cost of medical care for those who are injured and the repair and replacement cost of damaged vehicles is skyrocketing. But what can you do about it? Hi, this is Judd Gardner with Gardner Insurance Solutions in Lynchburg. We've been helping Central Virginia drivers purchase the coverage they need at affordable prices since 1993. Talk with us before you pay again. We represent numerous companies and have many cost-saving strategies. Gardner Insurance Solutions, 434-316-5433.
Hi, Gary the Third here, and I'm excited to say spring has arrived at Gary's Garden Center with great plants and a great selection. Gary's has seasonal color flowers along with vegetables, 60-plus varieties of herbs, perennial flowers, and much more. With friendly service and great advice, we are always happy to answer your questions. Visit Gary's Garden Center at 794 Leesville Road for all your lawn and garden needs. Stop by, say hi, and take a look around.
Are you ready to move to the next chapter of your life? That means you're ready for us. Hi, I'm Moyanne Harding, the region's only total turnkey realtor and interior designer. We'll come to you and help you decide what you're ready to let go of and bring you top dollar for those unwanted items. Most importantly, we'll sell your most valuable investment, your home. With decades of experience, just hand your keys to us and let the stress melt away. Call me today and book your consultation, www.moyanne.com.
Moyanne Harding, brokered by Keller Williams. Join the Lynchburg Hillcats at Bank of the James Stadium this summer for any of your favorite nightly promotions. New this year are Senior Sluggers Tuesdays, where members of the Silver Sluggers Club get in free, and College Pride Night, where those wearing college apparel receive a discounted ticket on Wednesdays. As always, we'll have Thirsty Thursdays and giveaways and fireworks on the weekend, and free admission for Kids Club members on Sunday. Get your tickets today at lynchburg-hillcats.com.
Welcome to the Villas at Oakwood. Our stunning community offers spacious, modern, wheelchair-accessible villas with top-of-the-line amenities. Enjoy views from the Peaks of Otter from your patio home. Connect with neighbors at our exclusive clubhouse. Discover your dream home today. Experience the maintenance-free lifestyle that you deserve. Visit us behind the Bedford Memorial Hospital, online at thevillasatoakwood.com, or just contact Robin Lee Sage at 434-238-4477.
Join us at the Thrive Lynchburg Health and Wellness Expo on May 2nd and 3rd at Liberty University's Indoor Track Complex. Meet over 50 vendors, including physicians, gyms, and a wide range of health and wellness experts. Enjoy free admission, fun activities, and educational sessions for the whole family. For more information, visit thrivelyh.com. We hope you come see us at Liberty's Indoor Track Facility on May 2nd and 3rd for the Thrive Lynchburg Health and Wellness Expo.
My name is Ariel. When I arrived in the U.S. at 19, I struggled to find job opportunities without my high school diploma. My entire life changed when I took a chance and got my high school diploma at age 22. Everything I have, my education, my career, my marriage, I owe to the Adult Literacy Center and my teachers. They were with me every step of the way, helping with my English and math, making sure I pushed through all the challenges.
Ariel, your success proves that what I'm doing as a teacher has real meaning.
It was an honor helping you achieve your greatness. Now you're helping others achieve theirs. It inspires me.
Education was the key that unlocked all my opportunities.
When you graduate, they graduate. Find free and supportive adult education centers near you at finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The grit of the sidewalk crunches under your shoes as you walk up the driveway to your newly renovated home, and as you lean against the new Chevy Suburban in your driveway. That's when you realize that listening to VTR in Sports changed your life. Your business messages, visually written, resonated with our audience and brought you new relationships and clients. That's the power from partnering with VTR in Sports. Access that power, then enjoy the fruits of our labor. Start now. Email info@virginiatalkradionetwork.com.
Head to lynchburg-hillcats.com to lock in your tickets for the Lynchburg Hillcats this season. Now here's VTR in Sports.
Hey, gang, this is Bud Foster, former defensive coordinator for the Virginia Tech Hokies. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle BT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
A man who would much rather be talking with us now about local sports than the football team, at least his beloved University of North Carolina, given the last couple of days from CBS News to everything else, is Ben Cates of newsadvance.com as we welcome you back into the Fast Lane, chatting with the aforementioned Prep Sports reporter. Ben, a pleasure to be speaking with you. Should we just proceed straight to high school sports and away from that subject that seems to be generating more flames and maybe not the good kind?
Thanks for having me, Ed. Yeah, I mean, that's a disaster of a situation there. Seems like right now anyway. So yeah, we can bypass it. I have a few opinions on it, but you know, yeah, it's very interesting. It's one of those moments where you stand by and you're just kind of like, yeah, we're a basketball school.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to describe that one. And we'll get into our thoughts when we have a little bit more time in the Fast Lane. But we have to ask, do you have anybody that's, about half your age handling your social media accounts for you and advising you on what to do in your job?
No, absolutely not. And always, forthcoming with any information to answer questions as I can. So, yeah.
That's why we have you in the Fast Lane, is Ben Cates of newsadvance.com is hanging out with us today. Ben, baseball last night in the Seminole District, as loaded as it is, Amherst looked like they were starting to get momentum. Was that the worst possible spot for them to be getting an LCA team, off of a loss to Jefferson Forest and looking to break out, which the Bulldogs did, scoring 2, 2, and 1 through the first 3 innings and a 7 spot in the 4th to cruise to a 6-inning victory?
Yeah, it's Amherst is in a spot where it's kind of a rebuilding year after losing a lot of guys on last year's team, and so this is a team that we've seen kind of hang around with a lot of district teams for a while. LCA coming off that loss, probably pretty hungry. Just never could get the bats going consistently against a really good Jefferson Forest team that is loaded with arms, but still just a great game last Friday night between JF and LCA, a 1-0 game, pitchers duel, and it was exactly what you want this time of year from the top teams in the Seminole.
Ben, we will ask you to get your usher on in the Fast Lane, as we like to call it, and confess to us. You had the article up, Arms Galore, about Jefferson Forest's deep pitching staff. And then they proceed to get a 1-0 victory, which is the quintessential pitchers duel against LCA, who they've been one of the top teams consistently in local baseball since before, but even as they have joined the Seminole District. Did you gain a little satisfaction knowing that, you might not be quite on this level?
Don't go blindly through life. Call me now for your free reading.
The level of the legendary, RIP to her, Miss Cleo, but that you did seem to forecast some good fortune for the Cavaliers on the mound.
It was an interesting timing. I kind of wanted to write something ahead of that game. And I should say it was I believe Thursday night instead of Friday. It got moved up because of rain. So it was just kind of like, one day after that story ran, you've got a game moved up 24 hours. But yeah, it's a very interesting situation, I think, at JF this year, like missing the playoffs because of a really weird kind of setup in Region 4D last year, where JF had only, I think, 5 losses on the year, 15-5, something like that, and didn't get in. And that has since been corrected in the region to kind of expand the field because, that region is so baseball heavy with really, really good teams. JF, I like the makeup of this team right now. It seems like it is primed for the postseason when you've got, a lot of schools that are really successful have 2 or 3 good pitchers, and you kind of just hoping on those arms and being aware of pitch counts. Well, JF doesn't have that problem at all. I mean, when you've got 12 guys that can throw, that have gotten innings so far, and 14 of the 16 or 17 guys on the roster that can pitch, that is amazing. And so really stockpiling arms there. There's no real, dominant guy that's just like JF has had in the past, where it's just like, this is most definitely our guy. They throw guys out there for 2, 3, 4 innings at a time, and give teams different looks. And it's really difficult to go up against that kind of those kind of arms when you're just throwing different guys out there. If one guy is having trouble, just put another one out. And I've never really seen a high school team, especially in our area, that has that many arms. It's really impressive. And, a lot of those guys are doing really good things. And, you've got a team ERA that's something like 0.50 or something like that. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
It really is. I mean, that's just stacked when you're thinking about baseball at this particular juncture. What type of a luxury is that for Ryan Gilliland? And what has he said about the luxury to you, Ben, about the fact that when you have this many people, you can have a quick hook and presumably you can shuffle things around as necessary. And not to say that you don't have faith in your players, but if you realize somebody doesn't have it, you don't have to sit around and wait. You can pull them and maybe even save them for the next day because they went so short.
Yeah, I mean, coach has been really, said this is definitely the deepest staff we've ever had, and he's right. It's like I said, it's something I've never really witnessed before. But these guys. Another interesting thing I think is these guys kind of know their roles and are able to come in as you can have traditional setup guys, you can have guys in closing roles. And you don't really see that a ton of that in high school. And you also don't see a lot of guys who, because you've got so many arms out there and so many players that can be kind of utility guys, that your pitchers a lot of times, don't even have to hit unless, you've got a pitcher who you really want in the lineup. And so that's pretty interesting too, because a lot of times in high school, your pitcher is one of your best hitters as well. And so when you've got guys who their sole role is to go out there on the mound and do their business, it really makes for a team that has a ton of depth when you talk about heading into the postseason at the toward the end of May.
Ben Cates 8, Twitter and newsadvance.com with us here in the Fast Lane. Ben, JF knocked off LCA in that pitcher's duel 1-0 late last week. Of course, the Bulldogs, as you would expect, bounced back for that 13-3 victory against Amherst last night. Are the EC Glass Hilltoppers sliding under the radar in baseball, maybe in part because they just don't have that signature victory like JF now just notched?
Yeah, I mean, this is a Glass team that is super talented. You talk about arms. I mean, there's a good amount of pitching at Glass as well, and some really timely offense that the team has gotten as well in some close games. And so that's a team. When you talk about Region 4D, when you talk about Jefferson Forest, that Glass team is could be a tough out in the playoffs as well. They've got a lot of just good quality players out there, and it's been like that the past few years at Glass. Just really strong baseball program going on, and so I think it's one of those things where it's Glass has had some bumpy years in the Seminole, as a lot of teams have, but really playing great baseball the past few years. I've been impressed with it.
Ben Cates with us in the Fast Lane. We're chatting with him. It appears right now we've got a 3-team battle with JF, Glass, and LCA atop the Seminole District. Ben, yesterday it was also Brookville getting a narrow victory over Rustburg. You mentioned Amherst is down, so we're kind of putting them in a different category. Normally they're in that top 4 of Seminole District teams, but this is not necessarily the year for that. How much is Brookville beating Rustburg yesterday the type of matchup which shows that, okay, these teams, they're not quite on the level of the top ones in the district, but they're also teams that have enough that can be feisty on any given night?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really good game. I was keeping up with that one, and impressive how Brookville kind of stepped on the gas there eventually. And this is hard to say, I think, right now. But this is a Brookville team that's showing signs of improvement. Really took last week, took LCA really deep into the game, and LCA kind of won in their final at bat and came back. But Brookville really had them on the ropes for a minute there for most of the game. And so this is a Brookville team that I think is improving, and is obviously has its eyes on trying to get into the postseason.
Ben Cates 8, Twitter and newsadvance.com. Ways to keep up with our local reporter from the Lynchburg News in Advance, who's with us here in the Fast Lane. Ben, good to chat with you. We thank you for your time today. We look forward to chatting again soon, and wishing you more success on social media and with your media obligations, including today in the Fast Lane. I hope it went better for you. I'm going there. I hope it went better for you today in the Fast Lane than you would say that your coach at North Carolina had on CBS a couple days ago.
Ed, thank you so much. I always enjoy being with you.
Indeed. The diplomatic answer, the ever diplomatic Ben Cates here in the Fast Lane. We will get into that more, but the fact that North Carolina is releasing statements, or Belichick in his camp on behalf of North Carolina, and then CBS themselves. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, the level of perspective is, again, I get it, but what do you have to gain? Like, so here's my thing. It's very sticky mixing business and family, and the business of Belichick's brand with, love her or hate her, but his girlfriend. She's family to him right now, whether we can laugh about the fact that there's like a 50-year age gap between a 73-year-old and like a 25-year-old. You can laugh about that all you want, and sometimes justifiably, but if you're in that spot, like, okay, time to get my usher on for a moment here in the Fast Lane.
Uh-oh.
Most people know my wife's older than I am by 16 years. So, like, I knew it was going to be an awkward conversation for some people previously, and I knew it was going to be an awkward conversation for people who were not familiar with us. But you have to have a presence of mind that that's coming, and good quality people are not going to make fun of you. But when you put yourself in the public spotlight, like Bill Belichick has done with his life and job, and of course, his girlfriend, whatever you think of her, if she's supposedly a social media expert and consultant, you have to be able to anticipate the fact that these things are going to be discussed and brought up even when you say it's not, especially when Jordan Hudson is involved, Belichick's girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, is involved in the business of North Carolina. Like, if he's just dating a 24-year-old as a 73-year-old man, but she's not doing anything with North Carolina, I 100% believe at that point, like, if you want to say, hey, that's our business, I'm cool with that. It may be weird, but I'm cool with that. But when you start to involve her in the day-to-day operations, whatever it is, or even just one aspect of the business, at that point, it is going to become subject to fair game. And that's where I look at this situation and go, if you're going to consult with somebody on PR expertise, you have to be able to have the foresight to see what's coming down the road and stamp these things out going forward. And Belichick, as great as he is one of the best coaches of all time in the NFL. As much as I think from an X's and O's standpoint, he can coach circles around everybody in the ACC. And as much as he's battled distractions before, so while it's distractions self-inflicted on the program in North Carolina, I think he and his team can kind of navigate that from an X's and O's standpoint. From a just raw optics standpoint of what's going on here, I think it's reasonable to say that too.
Ed, if you get an interview with Bill Belichick, what are the chances that if Jordan Hudson's still around, that she interrupts your interview?
I don't know. I'd like to think we're professional enough in how we conduct interviews, so I'm not looking for like gotcha pieces. But it's one of those, like, I'd be more inclined to ask about her role and how she handles things at North Carolina, and that as opposed to like their personal relationship, because while a lot of people do care about that, and again, when you're in the public spotlight, like, that's going to be something they care. Like, I personally, I don't. And I think there are ways you can definitely navigate that. But, I mean, you did a 30-minute interview. First of all, we welcome Bill Belichick, welcome anytime in the Fast Lane for 30 minutes, and we're not going to edit it out at all. We will play the entire 30-minute interview just for him and just for you. But that is part of what you do. When you sign up with CBS in 60 Minutes, and I guess whichever version of CBS did this, when you sign up with a large platform and agree to it, you're kind of agreeing on their terms. And again, Belichick wants to date Jordan Hudson, go for it. Whatever makes you happy. I'm a believer in a free country in that regard. But when you're doing that, if you have an experienced, seasoned PR consultant around you, Parks PR, our girl, Karita Parks from Bowie TV, who does PR work as well, I'm sure she could have advised this situation. In fact, you know what? Guest idea. We might have to get her in the fast lane because there have been a lot of instances where her PR advice could come in handy. So we just thought of it. Instead of continuing on this, we will have more thoughts on this coming up, maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday in the fast lane.
Oh, I can't wait.
We're going to try to get the expert, Karita Parks, on. Meanwhile, when we return, hockey expert, 3-0 lead. Did they run out of gas? Did the Hurricanes show that much strength? Neil Smith, Stanley Cup winning NFL executive, will weigh in on that and more next here in the fast lane.
When shopping for auto insurance, it's worth paying a little bit more for strong coverage against uninsured drivers. That way, if you're on the wrong end of an accident, you and your family are protected from drivers with little to no insurance. Hi, I'm Randy Trost with Trost Law. Just a friendly reminder that saying yes to a strong policy with higher uninsured motorist coverage limits is a small investment that you can make to protect you and your family against a big headache. If you've been injured in a motor vehicle accident, call us at 777-HURT or visit trostlaw.com.
Are you ready to move to the next chapter of your life? That means you're ready for us. Hi, I'm Moyann Harding, the region's only total turnkey realtor and interior designer. We'll come to you and help you decide what you're ready to let go of and bring you top dollar for those unwanted items. Most importantly, we'll sell your most valuable investment, your home. With decades of experience, just hand your keys to us and let the stress melt away. Call me today and book your consultation, www.moyann.com.
Moyann Harding, brokered by Keller Williams.
Join us on May 2nd and 3rd for Freedom 424's annual 5K event, Run for Their Lives, brought to you by Thrive Lynchburg Health and Wellness Expo. This combination of events seeks to bring Lynchburg all of the health and wellness resources that it so deserves. Come experience our 5K, our kids' 1-mile race, and an expo with over 50 vendors to give you the tips and tricks you need to stay healthy. We hope to see you out at the LU Indoor Track Complex Friday night or Saturday morning, May 2nd and 3rd.
Hi, Gary the Third here, and I'm excited to say spring has arrived at Gary's Garden Center with great plants and a great selection. Gary's has seasonal color flowers along with vegetables, 60-plus varieties of herbs, perennial flowers, and much more. With friendly service and great advice, we are always happy to answer your questions. Visit Gary's Garden Center at 794 Leesville Road for all your lawn and garden needs. Stop by, say hi, and take a look around.
We're here with Colt from We Fix Stupid Computers. Colt, to go along with your residential or individual walk-in services that you offer, you also do a lot of business IT support. How about you discuss that, and what specifically do you do to help businesses in the area?
We see a lot of that. Small to medium-sized businesses, they still have their IT projects. They still need resources to help them within their office and for remote users. And so we'll step in and fill in the gap where we do a lot of projects for them, help them manage their resources, their budgets, and get their technology under control.
Colt, how can these people reach out to you to assess their IT needs?
Call us. Our number is 434-525-8590. Our website, wefixstupidcomputers.com. We're on Facebook. And our office is here locally, 14690 Forest Road, right next to Scott's Cabinet on 221.
Few things are more majestic than nature, as long as it's outside your house. Unfortunately, when wildlife gets inside your chimney, it leads to problems for your chimney and your house. Prevent this problem with Black Goose Chimney Service. They provide one-time solutions to ensure the wildlife stays outside your home. And if you've had wildlife inside your house, Black Goose Chimney Service can deal with the aftermath and make sure they don't return. Call Black Goose Chimney Service and visit them at blackgoose.net.
Car insurance rates are rising rapidly. That's no secret. It's because the cost of medical care for those who are injured and the repair and replacement cost of damaged vehicles is skyrocketing. But what can you do about it? Hi, this is Judd Gardner with Gardner Insurance Solutions in Lynchburg. We've been helping Central Virginia drivers purchase the coverage they need at affordable prices since 1993. Talk with us before you pay again. We represent numerous companies and have many cost-saving strategies. Gardner Insurance Solutions, 434-316-5433.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
So I'm not one of those who believes there's nothing virtuous about the NBA playoffs. Again, starting with a compliment before going to the insult here in the Fast Lane. But if you look at the NBA playoffs right now, 2 series ended last night. Pacers, Bucks, Celtics, Magic at a 4-1 score for both of those. Another could end this evening at a 4-1 score. We've had a couple of sweeps already in the NBA playoffs. Meanwhile, on the other side of it, the NHL playoffs. We have 5 game 6s, which means there's a chance for a game 7. 4 of them are taking place tomorrow night. There will be another one because Winnipeg and St. Louis are tied at 2 games apiece, which means there's going to have to be a game 6 at least to get to that point. The potential for another game 6, whether the Canadiens can extend it against Washington this evening or the Lightning against Florida, which speaks to how tightly contested a lot of these matchups are in the NHL opening round versus the NBA, just from a broader standpoint. So, for perspective on that, why that's the case and whether or not that makes this even more exciting, Neil Smith of the NHL Wraparound Podcast, Stanley Cup winning NFL executive and former general manager of the New York Rangers, back with us once again. Neil, great to be speaking with you. When we bring up that compare and contrast, what does that say to you about the overall health of postseason hockey, even with the fact that one of our local teams already finished off a 4-1 series victory, the Hurricanes, last night, and the other could do so this evening in Washington?
Well, there's a great amount of parity in the NHL right now. And Vic and I, my partner on the podcast, we're talking about the 90s and when you used to get sweeps all the time. And Detroit Red Wings swept Washington in the final. Other teams, Detroit got swept themselves by New Jersey in 95. But nowadays, everything is very, very close. The teams are very much equal. I think that the best team ends up winning out for the Stanley Cup, but that makes all the series extremely exciting because you never know what's going to happen. Even the 8th seed in the West, who's playing the President's Trophy Winnipeg Jets, that's St. Louis versus Winnipeg, and Winnipeg's the first team in the whole 32-team league. That's been a hell of a series. They're tied at 2-2, as you just said.
You brought up that point about teams that could win the Stanley Cup playoff. In the NBA, I mean, most people think right now you're looking at maybe 3, maybe 4 to 5 if you really stretch it. And the NHL, you probably have at least 6 obvious ones, 3 in the East, 3 in the West, but you could probably stretch that to 7 to 8 teams that have a legitimate chance to assert themselves over the course of the postseason.
Well, I can't forget 2019 when the St. Louis Blues at one point during the regular season were last overall in the entire league, and they made the playoffs. They got into the playoffs, and they ended up winning the Stanley Cup in Game 7 in Boston. And so you never say never with these teams. Now, most of the time, Ed, I'm going to tell you, it is not a Cinderella team that wins the Stanley Cup. St. Louis was. But most of the time, it ends up all coming out in the wash. And last year, Florida, I thought, was the best team. Edmonton was clearly second best team, and they played each other in the final. But it makes it really exciting, and no team goes down quick. I mean, it's really hard to beat out an NHL team very fast. And the teams are very equal. It's really is amazing where the league is at.
Overall, in terms of the volume of teams that can make runs, that can keep competitive games together, obviously I get it. The NFL is America's pastime, but when you look at quality of depth for the playoffs and the volume of these series that go deep, 6 to 7 games, the NHL clearly delivering that. And more on that in a moment. But one that looked like it was going to get to 6 or 7 games, but did not last night. The New Jersey Devils, they had that 3-0 lead at the end of the first period and end up losing in a couple of overtimes down in Raleigh to the Carolina Hurricanes. You guys have talked for a while now, Vic, or with your colleague, Vic, Neil. You and Vic have talked about the New Jersey Devils' big picture, kind of running out of gas with all of the injuries that they had experienced over the course of the season. Did you see that as well on display last night, or was there also an element of Carolina just having the raw power to overcome that?
I think the second part is more true than the first, but let me tell you what happened. So New Jersey's fighting for their life, and they came out in the first period and played like they were fighting for their life, and they badly outshot Carolina. They popped 3 goals in on Kochenkov, And all of a sudden, at the end of the first period, you're looking around going, how could this possibly be that Carolina's down at home? Very strong home team all the regular season. It's a hard place to play. And so something happened in that locker room between the first and second period, and the Hurricanes came out and scored 3 goals and tied it up within like 6 minutes of the second period. And then the game went on from there. But New Jersey still had some fight left in them, and their captain Hischier scored to make it 4-3. And it looked like, oh my goodness, are these, is this Devils team really going to be able to beat them? Because they have a ton of injuries on that team, including their very best player and his brother, who's probably their best defenseman. So it was hard to believe. But the Hurricanes, at the end of the day, did that great comeback. They won it in overtime. Sebastian Aho is a superstar player who scored the big overtime goal. And I just think at the end of the day, I know it was 2 overtimes. It could have gone either way. Markstrom held the Devils in there for so long, their goaltender, and the better team ended up winning.
What concern, if any, is there for you with the Carolina Hurricanes? And you guys were recapping Game 4 in New Jersey on your podcast earlier this week, and I know y'all drop those daily for the NHL Wraparound podcast, Neil. What concern is you kind of flat in Game 4 and then flat to start Game 5, or does the way Carolina finished last night eradicate those concerns?
I think Carolina is going to have some time to prepare for this next round and who they get in the next round, and I think they'll be prepared for them. I think the biggest question ahead with the Hurricanes right now is, will Anderson, their number 1 goalie, come back, Frederik Andersen, or will he stay out injured? He's got an injury history. He's got a history of not playing unless he's completely perfect, and which isn't like hockey players. They usually are all playing hurt. And they've got Kochetkov in net, who is a good goaltender, but Freddie Anderson's been their number 1 guy. I don't think that there's going to be any flatness in the Hurricanes in round 2. It's going to be a more challenging series than the first series was. And I think Rod Brind'Amour will have them way more than prepared.
You mentioned Rod Brind'Amour. How do you handle that challenge? Obviously, you guys had Mark Richter when you were with the New York Rangers and won the Stanley Cup in 1994, and that franchise has been lauded for having great goalkeepers and a lot of tough goalkeepers. If you're Rod Brind'Amour, how do you handle that, especially at this time of year where, listen to your 1994 and Forever podcast that you guys did on the NHL Wraparound about that run in 94 with the Rangers, but guys are playing banged up this time of year in general.
They are. They really are. And, there's nothing you can do if a player like Freddie Andersen says, I can't go. I'm just not feeling right. Whatever his injury is, if it's a concussion and his head doesn't feel right, or whatever happened to him that night when Meyer backed into him. And I thought that should have been a penalty. It was crazy that it wasn't. However, Anderson had to leave, and then Petro Kochetkov came in. One thing that's good about Rod Brind'Amour, there's many good things, but one good thing that he's done with his goaltenders is he's given Kochetkov a lot of games this season. So the team is comfortable in front of him. The team knows they can win with him in the net. It's not like with some backups where they go in and the players are all looking at each other going, we're going to have to block a lot of shots tonight. This guy's a good goaltender, and I think they can win with him. The case will be who's at the other end of the ice and does he outduel him, which is pretty much always the case in the NHL.
Neil Smith, NHL Wraparound podcast host and former New York Rangers president and general manager. He's with us here in the Fast Lane. Washington, 3-1 lead, 7 o'clock, so about an hour from as we're talking right now live here in the Fast Lane. They look to close out the Montreal Canadiens. Point blank, do they get it done and give themselves enough time to match that rest, basically, that their second-round opponent Carolina has?
I think they do. I think the Washington Capitals do win, but I thought the Toronto Maple Leafs would win last night at home against Ottawa, and Ottawa beat them 4-0 in their building. So take what I say with a grain of salt, because I think they will win. They're the better team. Montreal's made some great strides this year because there isn't a person on the planet who predicted they'd make the playoffs, and they had such a great second half of the season that they ended up getting that 8th seed. But I think Washington's just too much for them at where Washington's at. Washington was the best team in the East all season long. That never that never weathered. Like they were from day one till the end. They were the first place team in the Eastern Conference. And I think they will knock Montreal out tonight. But as I said Toronto would win last night against Ottawa, and Ottawa beat them 4-0.
So we'll wrap it up on this, Neil. This may sound like a ridiculous question, but you've been around the NHL for a while. Is there more pressure for teams in Canada in particular, given that nation has not won a Stanley Cup in decades, to close it out versus in a spot like Washington, where clearly there's a rabid fan base and they've won one recently, but it may not be the same level of pressure and expectation like in a place particularly like Toronto last night?
Oh, absolutely. And that game of Toronto and Ottawa, which are two cities that are in the province of Ontario, so they call it the Battle of Ontario. You have to remember that Toronto Maple Leafs are iconic. They go back decades and decades and decades to the original six. There's 4 million people living in Toronto, and Ottawa is a very small place compared to that. It doesn't have the number of fans that the Toronto Maple Leafs have and have cultivated over many generations. So there's no downside when Ottawa plays Toronto for the Ottawa Senators. But for the mighty Toronto Maple Leafs, who are expected to win and everybody's loving them, there's a lot of pressure on them. And that's how sometimes I think Ottawa goes in there and says, we'll throw caution to the wind and we can beat these guys. So I think that there is, in some ways, a more pressure atmosphere in the Montreals. Not this year, because everybody knows they're not one of the top teams. But when you're in the Canadian cities where hockey is a religion, basically, and that's by far the number one sport in those cities, there is a lot of pressure because every time you go to a restaurant, every time you go to the store, somebody recognizes you, somebody asks you questions, somebody does something. When I was living in New York and had 11 years there, I get recognized once in a while, maybe once a day somewhere, but it wasn't like you were like a hero when you went out, because there were so many celebrities there, and there also was only so many hockey fans. There's a lot of hockey fans, but compared to the population, it's a small percentage. Compared to the Toronto population, it's a large percentage of those people are hockey fans, and that's why the pressure is there.
That's the great insight that we get from Neil Smith, and we've had today in the Fast Lane, and that you'll find throughout the NHL Stanley Cup playoff run, especially if you're a Caps or a Hurricanes fan, because there's a good chance they'll be squaring off. Subscribe to that podcast now, the NHL Wraparound, and hear the insight from Neil and the voiceover guy you hear in the Fast Lane, Vic Morin. Neil, thank you for your time today. We'll keep it locked tonight, and we'll hold you to it, whether or not Washington pulls it through, even though your track record last night maybe warns us we shouldn't.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll be happy to come on with you anytime, Ed, and we can go review what happened in the surrounding. You can say to me, Neil, you got it wrong again.
Yes, indeed. Well, you got plenty right as well on the whole Bubble Lock Challenge from the regular season. So we have to mention the good with the bad. Neil, thank you for your time. We'll keep it locked, and I'll look forward to more.
Thank you, Ed.
Our pleasure. Neil Smith with us here. That does it for us today in the Fast Lane on W227 BG Timberlake, WVGM AM Lynchburg, WMNA Gretna Danville Southside, the VTRN Sports app, and of course, ask your smart speaker, open VTRN Sports, and Fast Lane Ed Lane, Facebook Live, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all the ways to keep up with us in the Fast Lane.
Last night with the Pacers and the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Bucks are officially bounced from the postseason, and I don't think it's hyperbole